Hello there. Welcome back to Williams. Today we're going to have a look at how you can actually recover from a season of no research. So in our previous Williams video, we kind of powered through with doing just development. We did no research, and as a result, we actually won the championship here fairly handily with almost 300 points down to Red Bull. Most of this was Alonso, of course, but at the same time, it is just show that it is doable to do a completely design-based strategy, at least in your first season as Williams, and still come out on top. Now, of course, we're going to have a little bit of a problem, and that is, as I said, we're going to have to go through next season, and we have a research here, which actually is probably the worst thing that we could have gotten to ignore, which is airflow, and of course also cornering to some degree. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can actually recover from this come next season. We're still not going to do any research. We have about a month left of this year, but we're not going to do any research to have a little bit of a test to see how the car is going to be performing next year, and also how we can make, get out of the hole. So currently, we're going to be losing about 20% of airflow on most parts. We're also going to be losing a bunch of airflow sensitivity, and as one might expect, this is going to have some pretty nasty repercussions for our car. So with that said, the goal of this video is very simple. We want to see if you can actually recover from a season of no research, and if maybe I should have started research, say, once we took the lead of the championship. So with that in mind, we are going to go ahead here and just speed along until the next season, and then we'll take a look at what the car looks like, and we'll have a look at what it looks like come Bahrain as well. Now, because this is going to be focused on research and kind of recovering from that, we're not going to be doing any race content, so just keep that in mind. We'll be focusing on the research aspect and have a look and see here if within, well, say come Baku, we can have a car that can still somewhat competitive, or if we actually did do a glass cannon move, one-shot wonder, and kind of give up a season in order to get that first championship. So that is going to be the goal behind this video. And yeah, looking forward to seeing if we can actually make something out of it. So with that in mind, the first thing we're actually going to do here is have a look at our current car. So this is the car that we have currently, and we are going to be comparing this to what we have come Baku and see just how, well, much stats to lose, and also how we look compared to, say, the Red Bull. So the Red Bull currently is slightly inferior to our car. I'm pretty sure they're missing some parts that they haven't replaced. That's the only thing that makes sense with these huge gaps. Definitely also with the cooling. So we'll compare the Red Bull next year. But generally here, as one might expect, I don't think we're going to have the same amount of stats. But we'll get going, get to next season, and then we'll start developing the car, see where our stats are at, and see if we can actually get a competitive car going. If you enjoy videos like this, please like, subscribe, as it helps me out a ton. And with that, let's just speed along until the next season. So here we are, we reached the end of the first season, and as you can see, the airflow and engine cooling is what we're getting hit by, airflow sensitivity, and the airflow for front, middle, and the sensitivity itself is going to be a bit problematic to deal with, and that is kind of the main, well, problem that we're kind of going to be facing here. Because it hits our ability to follow, it hits our cornering ability, and it hits our cooling. And of course, this is gonna hamper our car quite significantly come next year. But honestly, I think we can recover. So let's have a look and see just how our car is actually gonna be looking. So here we are at the 1st of January next year. We did absolutely no research last year. And as a result, the car now is gonna be, well, it's not terrible, honestly. I expected it to be way worse than this, probably back of the grid. But compared to what we expected, this is actually not that terrible. So we still have decent stats. I'm not gonna lie, we still have very, very decent stats here, although we did lose a lot of cornering ability. And we also lost some dirty air tolerance, some brake cooling. But I definitely expect us to lose more than what we did. So this is actually a very positive surprise. We have lost some top speed, but that is mainly just due to us having heavier parts. And what we're going to do now is actually really quickly go ahead and try and develop 6 parts before Bahrain, like we do every year, And the way to do this doesn't really change, but we'll keep it in here just to be on the safe side. And you can actually see that we have lost a decent chunk of the airflow middle. Energy cooling lost a little bit, and did we lose a little bit of energy cooling? I don't think so, actually. And we still have high drag reduction, but the difference between the airflow middle and the drag reduction here kind of tells the story of what we did indeed lose. But we can, of course, start to regain what was lost by simply doing, well, something like this. So we'll be making the pass that we have been making, you know, every time. And we'll try and do a bit of a recovery here as a result. So we're going to keep just one engineer on this, rushed. 20 days should be good enough. And we'll find the second quickest project, which would be the side pods here. And we'll get that done quick too. And we'll take the chassis and the side pods and convert those into basically the rear and front wing once those projects are done. But we see kind of the same here that we saw on the chassis. We have good cooling, we have better drag reduction, and then we have terrible airflow. And again, this is kind of what we expected. But I think we can recover without too much fuss. As you can see, we can actually improve by about 20% and get the attribute up to 66.06. And here's the thing, once you get close to 70-80%, you start to get very diminishing losses. So while we could have, of course, better base stats, it's going to be limited to gains that we could actually get. So I don't think this is a horrible situation to be in. It might be that, you know, doing no research, that I have been taking a little bit too, you know, I've been too worried about it because I haven't really given it a good test. And while that might be true, we'll see. For now, though, put 3 engineers on this so we can get it done in 20 days. And that should be enough that we can just rush through the front wing. And that should be a-okay. Now, the other two pieces that we want to make are, of course, the underfloor and the suspension. Because they are, well, they're kind of important to also get done in time. And we're going to go ahead and do what we usually do, which is put safety time in the underfloor, I think. Yeah, it looks like that would be a good idea. The underfloor really only lost airflow sensitivity, didn't actually lose any cornering ability. So that also does mean that we might want to... Yeah, we're not going to put safety time into the underfloor. There's actually no point in doing so. Putting it into the front wing here will probably be a better bet because it's had airflow, it has airflow sensitivity, some cooling, and we kind of have just airflow and cooling on the suspension. So yeah, we're going to put the safety period into the front wing because the front wing is one of the pieces that took the most of the hit here. It has sensitivity, which we kind of need, following ability, airflow front, low speed cornering, and also a little bit of brake cooling. So we'll put the safety time into the front wing. The underfloor has fairly high values here already. Remember, the low speed here actually goes from 3 to 5. So a stat of 434 translates into basically, unless my math is off, 67% expertise. This one goes from 5 to 7. So this one too translates into about 61%, 61%, I was about to say prestige expertise. And the high speed here goes from 7 to 80. So this one's even easier, 72%. So, yeah, as I said, the only thing we really lost on the underfloor was the airflow sensitivity. We still have a great cornering ability, so we're not going to be putting any safety time into this one. That's just no point. And we'll be making a cornering piece like we usually do. But we'll have to see if we might need to, again, pump up that airflow sensitivity, dirty air tolerance on some pieces here. But that'll depend on just how good our car is come the first race. And looking at this, it might be fairly decent. So we're going to go ahead with a bit of a gamble. And we could, of course, do suspension here, but I think it's fine. I think the airflow front hasn't suffered enough that it is a huge concern at the moment. So we're going to go ahead and do what we usually do. We could, of course, focus in a little bit extra medium speed cornering ability here. But for the time being, we'll just do it like this. And we'll go ahead and rush it. That is kind of what we do here. And to make sure that we can get the front and rear wing done, we're going to split the engineers that we have between the chassis and the side pods, which one would expect. So initially here, my initial thought on then doing no research is that it seems to be somewhat viable, even though we did get hit by probably not the worst regulation change, because it didn't actually take any of our cornering ability directly. It took it through airflow. If we've been hit by a direct cornering ability change, we'd probably be suffering way more. But this one might be kind enough somewhat, that we can actually still make a decent car out of it. Now, keep in mind this is on standard, so it might be a different story on hard. But for now, it is looking very, very promising. So we'll go ahead and speed along until we get the next part out. And then we'll start the front wing, the rear wing, and then we'll see what our car look like come Bahrain. Here we are. The first design is complete, which is, of course, the chassis. We're going to go ahead and get that manufactured immediately. And we'll just do it normally. We have time this time around, so just do that as normal as we would. We're going to lose some engine cooling here, but as long as you're around 60%, you honestly will be fine in most scenarios. So let's get that chassis manufactured, and let's get that front wing designed. And as I said, we're going to put in safety and wind tunnel time on the front wing. It is just the most sensible choice. It covers more of the stats that we've lost, and as such, we're going to go ahead and do just that. Now, the first front wing here, we're probably going to go ahead and make a low speed and medium speed wing. We can, of course, also add in high speed if we really want to, but high speed is something that we haven't really struggled to come across. And I want to see just how this would look if we were to go all in making a front wing. And as you can see, it's not looking too good. We're losing quite a bit of dirty air tolerance. We've already lost 2.7% from the rear wing. So we're going to be losing a ton more from this. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to matter much if we do this or this, because we're going to be rushing this part. We could, of course, lessen it by just focusing low speed cornering. That is actually something you can do. By focusing fewer stats, you can actually somewhat mitigate the loss of other stats. But we're going to do it like this. And again, just want to reiterate, the way the safety and wind tunnel works is that each of these units, in this case, we have 42 units because each unit is 0.1. Here we have 56 because each unit is equal to 1. Accounts for a day of doing expertise, or rather, day of development, day of research. You can basically get the gist there. So in this case, we're going to be gaining about 98 days worth of time worked on this front wing, which is going to give us an expertise boost for the next wing that we make. So that should actually be fairly decent. Sliders doesn't seem to matter much for the safety and wind tunnel, honestly. So that should be a-okay. We'll have a look, because these two are basically identical now. We're focusing one while ignoring the other. So I want to see what we can get on the next part. But yeah, that is the idea behind wind tunnel and CFD. And because it actually doesn't have any effect on if you do rushed, intense, or normal, you can actually do CFD with rushed and have no problems whatsoever. It's probably your best bet in terms of making progress. So there we are. We've gotten the design going. We're going to go ahead and manufacture the side pods as well. And we probably can make 3 here, I think. That should be fine to make before the first race. And we are getting the engine cooling back here. So again, I'm not worried for the engine cooling with what we've done here. I'm more worried about the brake cooling aspect. So it's going to be interesting to see how that actually pans out. Now, next up, we're going to, of course, make the rear wing. And as I said, we did lose a lot of airflow sensitivity on this one too. So we might end up in a bit of a weird situation where we're going to end up focusing a little bit dirty air tolerance in order to make this, well, a decent rear wing. And we can actually do that, just slide a little bit over. And I think we're going to go ahead and do that. It's probably going to be our best bet for... It's probably going to be our best bet for maintaining our dirty air tolerance somewhat, because we're already losing 7%. But I think for this first one, we're actually going to go all in. And we're going to see what our car looks like with kind of the same sliders we had last time around. Probably not completely the same. Because I'm unsure on the front wing if I had basically, you know, front low speed, medium speed, or if I just had low speed. So we'll make a car with the somewhat aggressive sliders, and then we'll see what it looks like, and then we'll go through how we can alleviate the problems with making a car like this. So with that, let's get that rear wing rush too. And unless we have an incident, all these parts should have no problem getting finished before we get to Bahrain. That is looking good. Suspension design has been completed, and of course what we want to do here is just go ahead and manufacture it right away. It's actually a fairly positive one. We barely lose any top speed, as you can see, and that's basically an effect of the fact that we have very high top speed. How should I word this? We have very high top speed expertise, and that definitely helps. Now, what I want to do now is actually start doing some designs and research that focuses on kind of alleviating what we lost. Again, airflow, middle, bit of cooling for the chassis. So what we could do is make pieces that kind of, again, alleviate that. We're going to be focusing front wing, rear wing, and underfloor for the most part. I think, because we do currently, the main thing that we're actually worried about is the dirty air cornering. But for the suspension here, we're also going to go ahead and do a little bit like this, where we do just focuses on, well, as you can see, brake cooling and airflow. We're not going to be making this this suspension, but you can kind of see it's not really a bad one. And we barely lose any top speed with this configuration, even though we have put it all the way down. And that is mainly due to the fact that, again, we are 70%. We're kind of reaching diminishing gains there. And you're seeing that same thing here. We can again translate. This goes from 3 to 5. 46 split on 2 would be 23. 23 plus 50, 73. So 73% in low speed. We have 30 split on 2, 15. Again, this goes from 5 to 7. So we take 30. We split it on 2. We get 15. Then we add 50. Because, again, 6 here equals 50. 5 to 6. Half the way to 7. So in this case, we have 65%, and here we have actually 74%. This one is the easiest to translate. It just goes from 7 to 8. So, yeah, we don't really have much to gain in terms of expertise for these 4 stats. It's going to be very diminishing. It's mostly going to be gained through research. So, well, even then, you're still going to get very, very little, don't get me wrong. So we're just going to make pieces now where we focus on what we lost. And of course, because we're focusing on what we lost, we're going to run them normal. Although, in the current situation, you can actually go ahead and do a couple of intense designs. But we're not going to do that for 2 reasons. In the regulation change that we had this year, we got hit with a minus 5 million to the cost cap. And also, we have we're using a lot of money now to rush these projects. So I'd rather have a little bit more money later on. And currently, it doesn't seem like we need to. Which is the key aspect to strategy. We don't really need to rush. And as you can see, we actually lost 8 days of design work. Bahrain in 25 days. And actually, that's going to be a-okay. Because even if we lose 8 days here, we're going to get front wing and rear wing in time. The main thing is going to be getting those underfloors out in time, which is just a little bit unfortunate. We'll just have to deal with that. So let us approve the pause. We don't actually have a choice. It's not one of those where we can gamble. And again, this is something that you're probably going to have to face during the start of the season. A bit of a problem, but it should be somewhat manageable. Now, just a quick mention here. We're not really focusing on the pit crew. But I've been focusing at the start of the season, basically December and also now January, on pit stop time. It's not going down a lot here, but you can definitely bring it down to about 2.7 seconds, I think, before the first race of the year. And honestly, I think the strategy is still just that. Focus on the pit stop time somewhat, but I think chance of mistake is just going to pay off more. Particularly with our, pit boss, if you will. But still working on that, so I'll have a look at that again some other time. I haven't focused too much on it. So with that said, I'll set up the practice here, and then we'll have a look at the car come Bahrain. The design work problem has been solved, and with that, the underfloor manufacturing, well, the design rather, is done. And of course, what we're going to go ahead and do is manufacture it as soon as possible. We can actually get it done before Bahrain here with just running normal, so that's what we're going to do. We'll get 3 made though, kind of need to here. And in 2 days, we're going to get the side pods, which means that we'll have 2 slots available for the rear wing and the front wing. but it's still going to be a little bit of time before we get them, 11 days. And as I said, what we're going to be doing is, for the most part, just focusing on the airflow sensitivity of the underfloor, the front wing, and the rear wing. So these are kind of the projects that we'll be doing now for at least a little bit. Probably say come Baku, we might change it up, but for the time being, this is how we're going to do it. We're just going to run them normal. We're not going to be using these pieces. We're doing them basically to get that dirty air cornering up a little bit. Because I still think, even before I've seen the end result here, that this guy is going to be decent enough where we don't really need to worry about, well, anything else really. Pro wing manufacture, let's get into it. And I think we're going to go ahead and rush it. Make 3 of them. It's going to be very expensive. Well, not really, 337,000 extra. It's going to be a little bit expensive, but it's going to be worth it, I think. And we're just going to do the same here for the rear wing. Don't really need to. Rear wings rarely take damage. But we want to, as I said, have a completely new car come Bahrain. And we're going to do the same that we did with the underfloor here. We're just going to focus on the stats that took a beating. In this case, these 3. We might ignore brake cooling a little bit later on. But we're just going to run a couple of normal projects like this, and then we'll see where the car actually stands. And for the rear wing here, we're going to do this. We could also go ahead and focus on one of the cornering abilities, or say drag reduction or DRS delta. It's probably going to benefit us in the long run if we do. But yeah, I think we're just going to do it like this. It's fine. Main thing we need to get up here is the airflow sensitivity, and we'll just run that project to on normal. So, I've actually made an error here. Sorry. We're going to have to cancel this front wing project, which is going to cost us a lot of time. Because I completely forgot that we put CFD time into the front wing. Because I am a silly goose who forgets easily. So we're just going to go ahead here and make a front wing similar to the last one. But as you can see, we've actually lessened the dirty air tolerance quite a bit. The loss, that is. Brake cooling losses, everything is looking a lot better already. But that is not an excuse for me being silly and forgetting. Been a bit of a stressful weekend. So we'll just go ahead and rush this, and this will be the final kind of piece. We'll have it by Melbourne. So there we go. That cost us a lot of money though, that mistake. And it's just a mistake that we're going to have to live with. But now though, we're going to speed along to Bahrain in just a few days. And then we're going to see what the car actually looks like. And performance targets wise, I still think we are going to be good. But I think we're just going to be a bit passive here. Both cars in top 10 for 5 races. 1 car on the podium. I still think we can pull that off. We have Alonso after all. Both cars in Q2, that shouldn't be an issue. And both cars in Q3. Now, the Williams board actually expects us to win this season, so we do have some pressure on us in order to make sure that this actually works. So, yeah, they definitely let power go to their head last time around. For now, though, we're going to have a look at the car. So, currently the car, compared to anyone else, is not great, but at the same time, it's not the worst this car has ever been. 15, 17, 12, 15, not terrible. The other teams, of course, have some base better stats, but the main thing I think we're going to be lacking this year is going to be that dirty air cornering, mainly because we didn't focus on it last year at all. We did focus on some cornering ability, which kind of alleviated the bit of the loss there. We kind of just got sent back to square one, if you will. And I think that makes it a little bit easier for us to get things going. So let's see how our car looks now. We've now put on every single part that we have, and initially we see that we're actually lacking some top speed. I believe this was 324, but I should probably bring up a comparison to the previous car. But this my immediate reaction here is this isn't too shabby. The dirty air tolerance here is a concern, but if we can run ahead for most of the season, that's not actually going to be a problem. We also switched to Red Bull engines to get a little bit extra acceleration, but that top speed loss is going to be a little bit troublesome. So we might need to actually, again, give up a little bit of cornering ability to get the top speed. But at the current stage, with Red Bull being not even second best at low speed, but they are the best at top speed, I'd say we aren't too shabby here, but we are going to have to go through the next 3 races here to see how our rivals are going to develop their cars, and then we can make another comparison. So the immediate thing that I see is that in terms of low speed, medium speed, we barely have an advantage now this time around. We have 0.030 here, we have 0.026, and we still have a pretty sizable high speed advantage, but it won't matter too much in the first few races. And as a result, to Red Bull here, once they develop the car, they might actually have a stronger car than us, which means that we are going to have a little bit of a harder time this season potentially to get a win. But with that out of the way, honestly, the car here does look kind of decent. How are we looking compared to Ferrari? Are they the... Yeah, they're the third best team. Well, second best basically in cornering. A little bit of an advantage. Again, I don't think they've developed their car too much. We can actually have a look at that. Let's go back to Red Bull, which is basically the biggest threat. Let's have a look at the chassis here. It's... I think actually drag reduction chassis, so I think that one has been... Well, AI isn't super good at research either, that's the thing. So this probably hasn't been changed. Front wing. Looks pretty basic. You can see the difference in the airflow sensitivity. Rear wing. Massive cornering gains here compared to us, but you don't get much from it. What is it that you've actually cut down time on? I'm a little bit unsure here, but it looks like most of their parts are still somewhat balanced, and that is a big concern, because once they start making, you know, specialized parts, that's going to hurt us a lot. But for now, I'm going to be powering through Bahrain. I'm going to be powering through, most likely, Jeddah, and we'll see. We'll make it a little bit of a pit stop here to the front wing, to the suspension, to get another couple of projects going. But we'll be speeding through the first 3 races, and then we'll see what our car actually looks like compared to the AI. So the season opener is done, and the initial thoughts there might be, what is Alonso doing, Albon doing down there? Now, Alonso was pretty dominant here, which is good to see, but we have completely renovated our car, which basically was Baku last year, but we've been able to do it for, well, this race this year. So we're going to be comparing the cars again come Baku, but here, we definitely had a bit of an advantage. Now, Albon is down here for 3 reasons. He spun lap 1, putting him down to 28. He crashed once he made it back up to top 10. Just a little bit of wheel banging, but he did eat a penalty. And he crashed again in the last 5 laps, but honestly, no way he would have gotten anything better than 6th. He's still a bad benchmark here, though, because of those 3 incidents, so we'll leave him B for this first one. And we'll just jump straight into Jeddah. But what we're seeing so far is that so far it's probably been pretty decent. But again, we're going to have to see how Red Bull, Ferrari, and the teams around us actually develop before we come to a conclusion on if you should skip research or not. And honestly, you probably shouldn't. Let's be fair. For now, though, we're going to jump straight into Jeddah, and then we'll see how we look after that. So we're just done with Jeddah, and it went a lot better here for Albon. Alonso's still in charge. The gap has, you know, lowered a little bit, but that's fine. Now, Albon here couldn't really keep up with Verstappen. He was fighting Perez for most of the race, so that does tell us that we are kind of already in a little bit of trouble. Basically, we're going to have a bit more of a competitive season. We did have a couple of pit stop errors, though, that made things even more interesting. Lost a bit of time. But honestly, I don't think I would be too concerned at the current stage. I still think we have a very good car. So I think it's going to be pretty much a-okay. Now, the front wing that we just made, we're of course going to go ahead and manufacture immediately. And compared to the one that we currently have, this isn't that huge of an increase, but you can see that we get a decent amount of brake cooling, we get a decent amount of air tolerance, and that is kind of what we were focusing on for the most part. Because as I said, our expertise when it comes to, let's go into the design menu for this. If I can actually click far enough back that I can find it. Our expertise is actually high enough for these that we kind of are seeing those diminishing gains. We were kind of focusing a little bit on them, but at the same time, the gains here aren't very huge, so to speak. And that is probably what you're going to be seeing going forwards. And that is why we can kind of focus on dirty air tolerance and getting that back. So in theory, just from what we're seeing here, you can somewhat ignore research, but it does come at a cost. So I'd still say do some research. It's probably going to be better for you. But we are going to go ahead and make another front wing. This one is going to be focused on cooling and sensitivity, kind of like we did the last ones. And we'll see if we can actually, again, make a improved version of this this wing. Now, we do have another safety period, which we might just put into the rear wing. I'm thinking either that or the suspension. Most likely options, but it shouldn't be a big... it should not be a big issue. We had a couple of failed parts. Again, not really a big issue. We just make new ones and replace them. But I am looking at the current situation kind of a little bit confused, but at the same time, a little bit happy because it does seem like we won't have any huge concerns. You can actually just power through. And even if you don't do any research, as long as you've done your designs properly in the first season, you can still have a fairly decent car come second season. The AI is going to catch up to you by doing no research. That is kind of what we've seen here. Because as I said, come Baku, I think we're going to have a bit harder of a fight with Red Bull. We'll see. But currently, it does look a little bit more interesting for sure. Now, suspension research has been completed. And as I said, what I'm thinking here is that we actually might just go ahead and put a safety period into it. But honestly, with these stats, I don't think we have too much to worry about on the front wing. I'd say we rather do the rear wing a couple of times, get the cornering and the airflow sensitivity up on that thing instead. Because as we saw, the rear wing is actually pretty far behind the rest of the grid. So we'll have to see exactly what we want to do. But for now, we'll do another research project like this, get a little bit of medium, get a little bit of high speed development. Well, not really medium, but you get the idea. And after this, we'll probably just make a new suspension. But we'll run it like this normally. Again, sliders, just place them on the attribute you want to focus on. Unless, of course, you want to use it on the car. We're not going to be using that suspension on the car at all, so that's fine. And I think the best bet here is going to be to go into the rear wing, which is going to be a little bit sucky, but because it's going to be difficult for us to get that rear wing done before Baku. But it is second CFD wind tunnel period. And you can actually use that for for research if you wait until the research starts in the middle of April. So you do have that option. So the underfloor here, we have focused on dirty air tolerance. Let's see if we were to make a new underfloor right now with the low expertise that we have, new underfloor design that is. How would that look if we, made the same underfloor we made earlier? And as you can see, we're already getting a decent chunk of dirty air tolerance back. So if we do a little more, progress, we could get 5% dirty air tolerance. We'd lose a little bit of cornering, a little bit of top speed. But we can actually, pretty quickly here, regain some of that, some of those stats we lost. But it is going to require a little bit of sacrifice. But for now, I'm thinking we just do kind of what we have been doing. We'll focus on these one more time before we make a new design that we'll be using. And that is generally just how you're gonna have to develop if you've done no research. For now though, we're gonna go quickly through Australia here, and then we're gonna compare cars come Baku, when I think the Red Bull and every other team for that matter should have most of their parts designed. So let's jump into Australia, and then we'll see again, come Baku, how we're looking. Here we are at the end of Australia, and as you can see, we still have a pretty decent gap here down to Verstappen, but it was a wet race, that kind of influenced it a little bit. And we also had a look at Albon and his ability to follow with the dirty air. And let me put it this way, he could get overtakes made, but that's mainly just because the other aspects of the car are good. The struggle to get overtakes done though is pretty rough, so in the rain with the regulation change that we had, we are going to struggle this year. But as long as we can get out ahead and don't need to do any overtakes like Alonso, he can still gain pretty significantly compared to the rest of the field. We still have pit stop error problems too, which is not good. But yeah, it is a tiny bit troublesome. Now, we have Baku coming up next, and that is kind of the important one, because we wanted to see how our car looks versus everyone else's come Baku. And that is, again, kind of what we are going to be focusing on. And in terms of the development here, we are going to potentially get a rear wing done. I don't think we're going to get it done for Baku, though. That's the thing. But we are going to be using, well, never mind. We have another problem here. Wind tunnel shut down. So it's going to cause a pause to our projects, which means that we're definitely not getting it done in time. Didn't think we were going to get it done either, anyways. So what we are going to do is have a look now and see how does our car actually stack up against the rest of the grid. But we'll give them the 18 days up to Baku, and then we'll see where we are at. The rear wing design has just finished, and I want to do what we did last time around, which is to have a look at what would we be gaining if we were to make another competitive rear wing right now. Because again, what we did lose last time around is mostly the airflow sensitivity. And as you can see here, even just doing a base rear wing right now, we gain about 2.44 of that dirty air tolerance back, which is pretty significant. So we can actually get the dirty air tolerance up to 50% pretty quickly by looks of things. And what we are going to be doing, of course, is actually do something like this, where we do the opposite of what we've been doing. This is probably a little bit too many stats to focus on at once. But we're going to do this, and we're going to put in CFD and wind tunnel time on the rear wing, because again, it is one of the things that are lacking. Do I really need to do this? Probably not for the high-speed part. As you can see, it's already 70%. But that is the current part on the car, which we didn't focus high speed on, I think. But, so yeah, 70% here. This one is also pretty high, so we'll just do it like this. As you can see, with 30% boost to airflow sensitivity here. And we'll allow that to just happen. We'll see how the expertise gain looks with this in mind. We're going to rush it, though, and unfortunately we can't get it done before Baku, just so we can have a look at it, but we might have a look at it afterwards. That is generally how we want to do things. So let's speed along in now to Baku. There's nothing much that will actually happen. We do have the new regulation mode. This time we have minor changes to low speed or high speed downforce. And this is probably the regulation you need to do research for, because this one directly affects your cornering stats. So if you have this regulation, you definitely want to do research. But as we can see here now from the car so far, it seems like we are somewhat safe in gambling on other regulation changes. Of course, the 50% one, the massive one, you want to do just research for a year. But as long as we don't have cornering regulations, you can to some degree get away with it. And that is kind of what we have been seeing with our car. So first and foremost, just going to double check that we have all of the top pieces on our car. This one is not a top piece, so that's fine. This one is not. Again, it's a dirty air piece, and this too is a brake cooling and, well, other cornering piece. Although it wouldn't be a bad idea to put this one on. We lose some low speed, but we get more medium speed to compensate, and we get some extra brake cooling, so it's not really a bad piece, all things considered. But we do have the best pieces on the car, and we are still first in acceleration, DRS, and low speed, medium speed, and high speed, but we have actually lost out quite a bit in top speed, and we are losing a little bit out in the cooling department. So I want to have a look at this car now and see compared to the Red Bull. And as you can see, we still maintain the gap that we had when we looked earlier. They've closed down the medium speed gap. We have still a pretty good high speed gap. I don't think they've done anything with the rear wing though, which is concerning. They might have. But if we take a look at the chassis, it's probably focused, honestly. Looks like they've sacrificed some cooling. The front wing, again, I'm surprised that they have such high speed and not low speed and medium, which is, again, concerning. They do have some airflow sensitivity more than us, and, well, they're catching up in airflow front. But I would think at this point that they've actually made changes to the pieces here, but because they haven't actually caught us in DRS, I'm concerned that they haven't worked the rear wing yet. But what I'm seeing so far, again, Baku is kind of where we do set a bit of a benchmark, because it is a few months into the season, basically 3.5 months. It should be more than enough time for a top team to make every piece. We're kind of seeing here that we still have a bit of an advantage. So Can you actually skip research? You can. Can you still have a competitive car? Yes, you can. We have the proof right here. Is it gonna hamper this season? A little bit. But let's be honest here. What we can do actually now is do double research, or rather double dip on research. And what do I mean by this? It's actually very simple. We lost a lot of expertise last year, particularly if we again have a look at, say, the chassis. How are we going to do this? Like the chassis, we lost a lot of high speed just because, well, the airflow changes. That's an example. But what I mean by double dipping is that the things that we've lost, like the airflow sensitivity that we're lacking in the front wing, the rear wing, the underfloor, if we combine that now with the cornering losses that we're going to suffer this year, we can kind of focus on 2 research periods at once. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that, honestly. It's probably better to just do research, and after you're kind of covered for the losses that you're suffering, that should be more than enough for your car. But you can, of course, sacrifice a little bit of dirty air, a little bit of brake cooling, a little bit of engine cooling if you feel the need, and put your research into, say, top speed, cornering, whatever you fancy. But doing no research is potentially not as harmful as one would expect. And you can actually easily, or somewhat easily in our case here, recover from it, because we are still fairly dominant. Doesn't really look like that on the points here, but that's mainly due to Albin not scoring too well. But as I said, you can still get some pretty decent stats going. Is this a perfect representation? No. A perfect representation would be to test it on the cornering regulation change. That is probably going to be harsher, and it's the one that we're going to be getting this time around. But can you actually recover from a season of no research? Yes. Is it going to require you to make extremely specialized parts? Yeah, it is. It's basically going to... I don't think we could make any sort of recovery here unless we made those parts for cornering that we have. Cornering just is, again, the king. It is the most efficient stat for your car. But as we've seen here from Albin, because the cars are so close now, Albin is just having no chance to fight the Red Bull. So you are going to need a world-class drivers, or rather world-class drivers, for this to make it work. 81, 82 drivers is probably not going to cut it. You're going to need something closer to 90, maybe 87, 88 could make it happen. But research-wise, you can potentially go all in. Catch up next year with research. Basically, in our case, we're going to be working on dirty air tolerance, in addition to, you know, either low speed or high speed cornering, depending on regulation change we get. And honestly, I think that is how we're going to have to play this season. If you're interested in seeing that, how, well, double dipping research would work in this case, we could potentially do that next time around. But for now, I'm going to have to end this here. Unfortunately, the weekend has been fairly busy, which means that I can't do as much as I wanted with this. But yeah, we have, I dare say, although it is early in the season, kind of recovered from doing no research. We pushed hard enough last year that we could make a difference, but this is not going to work for cornering. I can say that pretty certainly already. This is not going to work well if you have a cornering regulation. Definitely do research then. Hope this video has been somewhat helpful to you. If it has, please like, subscribe, helps me out a ton. And I hope to see you around next time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.